Charles Mallows, you're working in the technology and sourcing division within Charles Russell Speechlys. So over to you, Charles. I think you're going to give us a little bit of an overview on the best practices when contracting for techs.
Yes, look, a bit of a whistle-stop tour. Let me just share the slides that I have. Lovely. Okay. So this is just intended as a bit of a whistle-stop tour on what we're calling best practice for buying and contracting for new technologies. I would say that this presentation is mainly aimed at those procurement specialists in the room, but it's probably also a helpful reminder to us as lawyers how we can help and assist our clients or our internal clients when we're contracting for new technologies. So in terms of best practice, I think fundamentally the most important thing is to set the groundwork of your procurement early, to understand exactly what outcomes you're trying to achieve by procuring this new technology. What can you do to get there? What are the stages that you need to get through to get to your end goals? Make sure you've got buy-in from your key stakeholders within the business at every level of the organization to ensure that you've got, as I say, a strong working relationship with both internal members of the business, but also a good understanding of what your external suppliers can deliver. You need to make sure you've got the right resources in place within the business to conduct a successful procurement, and that includes having whatever function within the business that's intended to drive the process. So it would normally be, in my experience, an IT team, able to explain rationale, drive the commercial argument, and be able to explain to everyone what the purpose is behind purchasing the new technology. I would always say get your legal team involved early and as early as possible, because we as lawyers can add a lot of value add early on in processes where strategies are being set and where the structure of deals is being put together. And it's at that stage that we can assist with explaining what potential risks there may be, but also helping with any internal compliance obligations, and, as I say, structuring a deal so there's less pain later down the line. Quite frequently with these sort of deals where we are engaged early, it's a case of dipping in early and coming back a bit later once the commercial work has been done and there's a better understanding of what the project's going to look like. But at least we've got the buy-in and the understanding to begin with. One thing I think that's important as well is particularly where you're dealing with a sort of disaggregated model where you've got multiple suppliers, is making sure that your contracts knit together well. By way of example, I was working on a deal a couple of years ago for a client in the financial services sector who was procuring a sort of automated aggregating tool in relation to market data, where they were sort of drawing market data through to help their front desk execute trades. And we were brought in quite late in the process to deal with the negotiations with the market data provider, and the customer themselves, our client, had sort of gone off and already agreed terms with its software vendors who were developing the automated software, and then had already started their process of development and design. And at this stage, where we were brought in, we come in and have a look at the terms, and big boy market data provider, non-negotiable terms or very little wiggle room for our client, but within those terms are a lot of flow downs and rules that are geared around how third parties were permitted to use APIs and license use of that data, which obviously hadn't been flowed down because there was a imbalance in the process where client hadn't focused on the big contract first, but focused on the stuff that needed to get done early without full understanding of the deal structure. And what that really meant in practice was undoing a lot of what had been agreed with those software vendors originally, so as to be able to flow down the obligations from the data provider. In the end, look, not a massive deal, but it was additional time and expense that could have been saved with setting groundwork early and understanding exactly what the whole process was going to look like. We as lawyers can also assist at an outset with understanding at a high level what risks there are likely to be in procuring new technology, and there I'm thinking of things like ownership and management of data, both personal data and any other sort of company-owned data that may be important, dealing with any issues in terms of resilience and how that's managed. And I'm particularly thinking about scenarios where you have got disaggregation and multiple suppliers and there's multiple vectors for potential risk for the business. Dealing with any sort of regulatory and compliance issues, or at least having an understanding of what they might be. Again, particularly relevant in the financial services sector, where you have multiple bodies with rules and processes that need to be followed depending upon your assessment of what it is that you're buying and its importance to the business. Dealing with any IP ownership, considering what may happen if there's a supplier failure and what other options there are in the market and what risks there are if things go south. I think quite often with new technologies, you're swimming in a small pool, and quite often there may only be one supplier that's that's able to deliver what they say they're going to deliver. So do you have a plan for moving on if that's the case? And all of that sort of knits in within some of these other points, like ownership of IP, escrow, that sort of thing. Are there any licensing or use restrictions that your suppliers impose upon you? Is that going to have a knock-on effect upon how you use whatever it is that you're procuring within the rest of your business? So there's lots of things to consider. All of those things can be brought together for consideration early on. Now they may change as time goes on, but it's worth having some form of someone in control of the process who can understand those points and who can manage and maintain that assessment as the procurement goes on. Now, in terms of contract considerations and drafting, I think what we're seeing, particularly with sort of commodity-based supply, is that you've got a lack of negotiation with a lot of suppliers, and that's based upon long supply chains and multiple pieces of products and kit fitting within offerings. So the sort of traditional focuses of contract negotiation are not always necessarily there, and actually a lot of what can be added in terms of value is focusing on the stuff that's shown on this slide, which is sometimes overlooked when you're talking about when you're going through a contract negotiation. But these are sort of key areas.
Charles,
yes,
you haven't moved the slide on yet.
Oh, it's showing on my screen. Let me try again.
Thanks.
So you go look. So we've got here. These are what I would see as important contract considerations, aside from still focus on liability and service description and security and data protection and all of those things. But here are some other areas where we can really focus that can help drive an agile project. So we've got dependencies and clearly setting out who's responsible for what at the outset. If you've got an internal IT team that's delivering something that fits within your overall project, make clear what that is, and make clear where the dependencies fall upon the parties. If you've got a variety of suppliers, you can have schedules which clearly set out responsibility across the piece. I mean, I found typically that where you do have that disaggregated model, suppliers aren't exactly willing or desirous of entering into a multi-party agreement. So part of the work is trying to get those dependencies to flow accurately between your various contracts. And as part of that comes clear governance procedures, and also an easy to follow and easy to operate change management process. So I think governance is important it's important to go beyond your sort of boilerplate governance provisions and understand exactly what it is that's likely to be an issue later down the line in your contract, and cover the management of that with accurate drafting, so that the parties have a good understanding of how they can manage their relationship going forward. And from a change perspective, again, we're dealing with new technologies here. We're dealing with tech that may well become regulated in the future. So it's accurate, it's sensible to have a process whereby you can easily agree changes to the contract, and also agree to any additional or variation in pricing that goes along with those changes, and have a process that's set out within your contractual structure. The parties know at the outset what they're going to have, how they're going to have to operate that when those triggers arise. And I've also added on here KPIs, and say KPIs sort of separately to your traditional SLAs and service levels, as a sort of softer approach perhaps to service levels and service credits, but having a set of performance indicators that are effectively checkpoints for each party, so they can make sure that the process is progressing as each party wants, and you can track, as a customer, you can track value through your hitting of KPIs and proper reporting and management. I think that's probably my 10 minutes, so I won't go through the other key terms that we've got listed here, but they're all your standard, your sort of standard considerations. And Praveen talked about fees. Just quickly on that point, I mean, I think what we're seeing mostly now on fees is a sort of blend between your T&M and fixed approach. So you've got a mixture of fixed costs and then a rate card for additional PS, or sometimes bank towers or things like that, where you've got upfront pricing, but the ability to call off time under those prices. And yes, I mean, price increases, just thinking about CPI increases or RPI increases, or whatever's being requested. One thing that we've been able to do in negotiations on those points recently is to agree to RPI as an increase mechanism for fees, but also have a cap on that, so that you've got a sort of maximum level that you can reach, given the the recently very high rates that we've been seeing. So that's the end of the presentation. There are my details. No picture, but you can see me on screen, and you can find my details on our website.
There's been a request, Charles, just to quickly flash up slide number 2, so we can see the topics that were included there. So there we go. Fantastic. Right. So just let everybody have a quick look at that and probably take a photo or something. But the slides and the presentations are going to be distributed post event. So
yes, happy to share them. Yeah,
excellent.
absolutely.
That's great. So you've pulled up a number of points that we really want to dig into later, a lot of it being around RPI and when to bring lawyers into the contracting process, but we'll again save all of those conversations for the panel.